Welcome to Digital Health Talks. Each week, we meet with the healthcare leaders making an immeasurable difference in equity, access, and quality. Hear about what tech is worth investing in and what isn't as we focus on the innovations that deliver. Join Megan Antonelli, Janae Sharp, and Shahid Shah for a weekly no BS deep dive on what's really making an impact in healthcare.
Hi, welcome to Health Impact Live Digital Health Talks podcast. I'm your host, Megan Antonelli, bringing you insights from healthcare's most innovative leaders. Today, we are joined by Robin McIntosh, co-founder and chairperson of Workit Health, a pioneer in telemedicine addiction treatment. Robin's journey from personal recovery to revolutionizing care delivery is both inspiring and transformative. Let's dive in. Hi, Robin. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing? It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you. And I've heard the story of Workit Health, and I'm excited to learn more. So tell me, I think you have another co-founder, Lisa. Tell me about your, what experiences and what inspired you to found Workit Health.
Sure. So, where to begin? We started Workit Health in earnest in 2015, and it feels like such a long time ago now, but we started it against the backdrop of digital health just taking root and right here in San Francisco. And really, we started it out of my apartment in Oakland. And Lisa and I had known each other for quite a while in AA, so in Alcoholics Anonymous, and a very long time. So I met her actually in 2009, and we were very close from the start. So she was just taking a hiatus, like a career sabbatical, and thinking about her next moves. And for me, I had a design studio with a woman named Kate Harris. And I actually just sent you the link before this because it's an amazing design studio. And I loved my job. I love Siren. It's awesome. We were just doing all of these really interesting creative projects, but one of the incubators we worked with in San Francisco was incubating digital health companies, and it's called Rock Health. And now they're more of a venture studio. So we got to work with a lot of the early Rock Health companies, and it was such an exciting time, especially Hallie Tecco had created Rock Health, and they had this little Chinatown office, and she had such a vision for how healthcare was going to unfold in the next 10, 15 years. Like, she truly is one of those preternatural talents. And I learned so much from watching her and learned so much from the companies that were creating these self-driving cars of healthcare. We worked on diabetes, and we worked on oncology apps, and we worked on all sorts of different interventions. But one thing that I found really striking was that nobody was working on addiction. And this was in stark contrast to my day-to-day, kind of the fabric of my everyday, where I had a lot of friends that were relapsing. I went to a lot of funerals, as did Lisa. And it was just strange. It was just something that nobody really talked about. And when you talk to health plans, this is hard to believe now, but when you talk to health plans and people that were sort of tasked with providing holistic, kind of wraparound care for these conditions, they commonly said, we don't really see addiction problems. And that's because of the way our fee-for-service structure works and kind of the guts of American healthcare. If you don't see it in your claims, it's not there. And I think a lot of us, and a lot of people in health plans, to be sure, were a little fed up with that narrative, considering it felt like the walls were closing in and encroaching upon our day-to-day existence. Everybody has somebody that has struggled with addiction. So Lisa and I got together around my dining room table in my apartment in Oakland. I was young; I was still in my 20s, and so I was just naive enough to do it, And I think that's really important, and it's an important part of our story, where we were basically looking at the world and saying, "This is broken. Everybody's being funneled to inpatient rehab. Why is nobody putting this online? Why can I order pizza in the middle of the night from Uber Eats or whatever?" Ride sharing was big at the time, and Lyft was going around with the mustaches and things like that. And we said, why isn't it that easy to access gold standard care? This is not rocket science. And, I think it was a case of us feeling like, are we the smartest people in the room or the dumbest people in the room? And I commonly feel like that. I'm like, do I have this genius idea, or is it why has nobody done this? Am I missing something? but we were just naive enough to do it. And we ended up starting Workit in that way. So very much like looking at the problem, diving into the research. Lisa's a very brilliant co-founder. Like she just inspires me endlessly. And we just dove right in. And so we spent a good, though, couple of years really researching the problem versus coming at it with a solution in hand. Like we were sort of ideating around lived experience, wading through a problem, saying like what could help, and throwing different ideas together and through beta testing. So that's how we started. It was a very organic way to start.
Yeah. Well, what a great way, and what a great time it was in San Francisco at that time. And that's so cool. I didn't realize that you guys had worked with Rock Health and stuff, but that was certainly, sort of that really fun time in digital health. But, and what a cool story. Tell me a little bit about what does make it different, other than it being a digital platform. What are some of the key elements that you think, make it a successful platform?
Sure. And I have so much more knowledge now. I didn't realize what made it different at the time and what made it unique, but Lisa and I have a lot of mutual respect and love for one another, and especially at that time. And so we really founded it as like a function of our own existence. And we really founded it with mission first. So a lot of the decisions we made later, especially in the last couple of years, the mission, I was just having a conversation about this, but the mission, the reason we started the company governs a lot of the big decisions we made later. So I can talk a little bit about that, but setting that DNA is so distinct from somebody that's rolling out of Stanford. Stanford has a lot of incredible programming, but like somebody that's rolling out of an MBA program somewhere, that wants to create a company because startups are the hot thing. Like I didn't know that there was this like world around startups. I really just thought Rock Health is cool. Like Rock Health is great. I was a designer and Lisa was in education, and she was an academic. And like, I didn't realize there was this whole industry around conferences and startups. Like I didn't do it for the money. I really did it because nobody else was touching it. I really did it because I thought it deserved to be in the world. Some sort of other solution between like dying, right? Rehab, and then what? Like white knuckling it by yourself. And I'm a maker. I like to make. So that's different. And that every decision we make later, we've raised a lot of money now and Workit's profitable, and it's a much bigger company, but every decision is still rooted in that DNA. So when I think about founding companies and when I think about those early days, you are really setting the dynamics of the business for later on. But that's different. I think that's different.
Right. Well, yeah, and you as both a patient and a designer coming at it in that scope. So that's
right.
Really great. And I think broadly, America's approach to mental health has never been a good one. Both either, and so where addiction fits into that, has even been more sort of neglectful and turning the other eye, right? So, but I know there's a little bit in terms of kind of that measurement-based care model. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that works with the treatment programs and approaches?
Sure. And I think this is also rooted in the context in which we were building, but it was always very important. So for me personally, I've been to a bunch of different inpatient rehab centers. My first one was 17. And then my last one was in Arizona. Actually, my last one was in California, but my second to last one was in Arizona. And it was $60,000, like back in the olden days before inflation. So it must be like 120 now or something, it was really expensive, all private pay. My insurance didn't pay any piece of it. So it was really expensive, all private pay. It was like my third or fourth place too. And so that made it complicated for my family, thinking like, is this going to work? Is this going to work? So we were probably a little bit more, especially my parents. And I was really young. I just had turned 21. And so my parents were more involved than they would be now, in my 30s. But so with my parents, they were, especially my dad, kind of questioning this rehab center, saying, what are the outcomes? Like, what are the outcomes? Is this going to work for her? And they very much claimed, like they very much felt okay. And I can't believe that it's permissible to do this, saying, we really don't know. Like we really don't do longitudinal studies in that way. We find that it's successful, but we can't really give you any scientific measurement. And this still happens. Like a close family member just went to a private pay rehab on the beach in Orange County. And I called them for her and said, well, what's your measurement-based care strategy? And they were like, we don't do that. We don't have one. So I think in these conditions, especially in these specialty care conditions, especially addiction, you're fighting for your life. And you will do anything to help a family member, a friend, yourself kind of survive. And so unfortunately, kind of the private pay industry has moved around that and kind of I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's one of those situations. It's not like there's a nefarious actor pulling the strings of everyone, but I think like kind of the private pay industry has created a black box where there should be a lot of transparency. Now, with the other thing with addiction, it's hard to have measurement-based care because you have such a transient population. People relapse. It's not a one and done deal. The addiction is for life. It's a chronic thing. And you have to, I work on my recovery every day, whether I'd like to or not. That's just what I have to do until I die. So it feels different now because it's so interwoven. But so that's another thing that's complicated. It's hard to keep track of people. Now, when the digital health era started and Workit started, we were by far the first digital app for addiction. Aside from a few other lifestyle ones, we were the first healthcare one. And so at least we thought so at the time. I'm sure other people think they're the first two. Mm-hmm. But so with Workit though, we really committed from the beginning to transparent outcomes. So we said, and this was an opportunity and still is that digital provides. When you have somebody that's logging in every day, meeting with your nurse practitioners and your MDs and their care team through video, you can track them so much easier than if it's an in-person experience, right? Because it's your phone. The phone is always with you through any situation. If you move residences, if you change careers, et cetera, you still have your phone and your phone number. We're tied to these objects. And that allows us to do a lot of deep data intensive work on how we're affecting change in the lives of our patients. So when we talk about measurement-based care, I think it's more important than ever, especially as we see the kind of the digital health world advance. It's more important than ever to think through what outcomes are we measuring and are we really moving the needle and how objective can we get? And the most objective thing, of course, would be like a blood test to see, but you can't always do that. So, but it's a whole interesting. So Workit, we take a PHQ-9 for depression. We do a lot of anxiety screenings. We also use something called the Substance Use Recovery Evaluator, the SURE, to ensure that people are meeting the goals that they set for themselves, those kinds of things. But we're very much committed to it. And we have a whole research department. From the beginning, we've always prioritized research and working with NIDA and some of our grant initiatives. We've always prioritized measurement-based care. So we have about a decade of longitudinal data, which is really novel and helpful.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was a biopsychology major in college. Mm-hmm. And then one of the first conferences that I really fell in love with was a behavioral health outcomes management conference. So, I know there was a lot of work being done then, and that was a long time ago, around measurement. And it's sort of in these walls of academia, but not necessarily in clinical practice, and I don't know that, it still sort of lives there, right? I think that
so strange, right?
Right. I mean, because it's certainly people there's a discipline around it, but it is hard to quantify. And it is, I think your point around tracking those populations is challenging. And then of course the care system around it is so siloed and disparate and not sort of continuous and necessarily part of the mainstream healthcare or what have you. So It makes it all that much harder. So what are some of the, things that you're seeing? I mean, I always think, particularly with digital health, that mental health is one of the best, applications, because I think it just does create accessibility where there's literally none. I mean, growing up in New York was different because yes, there were a lot of therapists, a lot of psychologists, and a lot of psychiatrists available. Although a lot of it private pay, it was still available. Here, I always joke in Southern California that I can find a hypnotist faster than I could find a therapist or perhaps a medium.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
It is,
yeah, a crystal shop.
Yeah, a crystal shop. I can get my a sound bath much faster than I can get a therapy session. So, digital platforms have been, a game changer with young kids and all of that. And of course, then during the pandemic, right? I mean, everything had to sort of go to telemedicine for that. So tell me, a little bit in terms of having done this for now, had been in play for 10 years, but then obviously lots of change and adoption happening during the pandemic. What are some of the findings that you're seeing from that?
I think it depends on, it's such a big question, such a great question. I think it really depends on where you look. Like I've seen a lot of stages of it, and we started Siren back in 2012. So we started Siren, Kate and I, right before the boom. So before Rock Health, like before everything sort of congealed and came together. So it goes in like these optimism hype cycle stages, and it kind of reflects the market, but healthcare is so resilient and it just keeps going, right? Like, it's not like it's not like a new shoe or something. It's not like a trend. Like, it just keeps going. Addiction just keeps raging on, unfortunately. And then also wellness solutions and the need for better care. So I think overall, when I look from a clinical efficacy perspective at the industry, you have like two kind of counter forces happening. And I'm kind of speaking off the cuff a little bit. But so one is this adherence to measurement-based care. So this idea that digital, because it is digital, and it will always fight for its place in the sun against in-person, because we have a bias towards in-person things, and we have a bias towards the past. We just always will do, especially in scary life or death situations, we will always sort of, as humans, fall back to what feels really comfortable. And so I see the beginnings of holding digital to a really high standard, much higher than, say, that inpatient rehab I'm talking about. Now, that's great. I think it's great to hold digital companies to higher standards than in person often. Like sometimes I go to the doctor's office and I'm like, I can't believe they're getting away with this, like yelling my name across the waiting room and things like that. And you're like, this is shocking. And I've been in a lot of medical settings lately, especially at pediatric behavioral health, because I have two daughters. And I'm just like, this is a HIPAA nightmare. And this is a HIPAA nightmare. I'm the worst. You're looking at the worst. I'm always like the HIPAA police. But I love that about digital. Now, the flip side, though, of course, is that it kind of strangles innovation. And so you had a lot of bad actors in COVID. You really did. You had really egregious actors doing crazy things, like prescribing things like candy or pushing doctors to kind of look the other way on certain chart details, like just really egregious things. Now, that has kind of put a stain in my mind on the industry and led to a lot of like crackdown on innovation. And so you unfortunately were in this kind of winter of innovation where I'm looking at the world thinking like, where's that 2014, 2015 energy, right? And like, yes, you have measurement-based care, but you don't want so much that it becomes a glacial healthcare company again, where it takes 10 years to put out a study that says something that we all knew to be true anyway. So I think we need to walk the line. Like, we definitely need to walk the line. And I think a lot of like I think we're going to see this a lot in AI, especially like a lot of the new technology, and the promise of the new technology is immense and powerful. But if we get in there and kind of say nobody can make mistakes and nobody can innovate and everything has to be pushed through a regulatory process, we're going to stay in the Stone Ages. And we're already in the Stone Ages of healthcare in America. We have a horrible track record of healthcare for being, for having the resources we do as a country. Our population health metrics are like woefully behind other countries. And so I think having like kind of insight into what the future brings and yields and requires is going to be really important. So I think a lot about that. And then there's a whole nother topic, which is kind of the investor landscape and funding, which is, right, something we can get into or not, depending on your appetite.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I think, to talk a little bit more about kind of the value and evidence, right? So we work with a group called Node Health, the Network of Digital Evidence. And there's, and that started in I think 2016, 2017, like right around there, where it was like, here we are, we're doing all of these implementations, doing a lot of, investment into digital health, but where is the evidence? Where is the value? And then now, almost 10 years later, you've seen this, you've kind of seen the pendulum swing, as you said. I think that with the pandemic, it was like, just do it. It's amazing. It's great. And then there was like a visible of some, where we had to sort of peel back. But now, and as you said, with investors, whether they're for the purchasers of the software, the applications, the services, or people putting, and companies putting money into it, wanting to know where is the value. But at the same time, digital is sort of ubiquitous and it's everything. And in some ways, the patients are also demanding it, right? I mean, that's the way they prefer care in some cases. So I'm curious, what you think about kind of that intersection of, what patients want and what is truly working, particularly with addiction. I mean, I think we're seeing, certainly right now with, sort of the sober, curious movement and people, that there was such a, sort of a stigma to addiction treatment. And there was one way to do it in many cases. And now there's many applications, many tools. So when you think about kind of the advancements, both, and this is a big question, we could talk about it probably all day, both like culturally, but also, from true clinical practice, where are we seeing the most impact on, addiction treatment?
Interesting. I would like to, I'm biased, but I would love to say digital. I have a different view right now, I think, because of the way the market is going and the lack of innovation. So I think the companies that prioritize, so I'll talk from a kind of a health plan perspective. I think the companies that prioritize novel and innovative models of care are going to eventually come out on top. I don't think we've found the Shangri-La yet. I think we need to prioritize innovation and just as much as like measurement-based care and kind of let people kind of experiment. Now there's this whole push towards value-based care as well, of course. And I think that the digital world has a better ability to really, because in digital, everything is open source and everything is malleable. So if we want to stand up a new innovative drug testing methodology that's super convenient for people, that says, okay, this is going to work on the lowest Wi-Fi, the lowest broadband that we can possibly do. We can do that in 3 months versus a brick and mortar clinic changing, building up a site and all of those, like all of the other things that come with like kind of the brick and mortar model. So we can push innovation farther. And so I think the more that we move towards consumer-based healthcare and the more that we have agency over the choices that we make, as people that are kind of sculpting our health plans and sculpting our premiums and like paying for things and paying out of pocket, the better it's going to be. So I don't know though. It's an interesting time. Like I find that, and I know I'm part of the Female Founders series. I'm very proud of that. I find, and I have a lot of friends, I'm a very like a gregarious person in a lot of ways, or very curious. So I ask a lot of questions, and I have a lot of friends that are either raising money right now or raising bridge rounds or continuing. And I'm finding that investors are really, really skittish around digital health. There's this clamp down and this feeling of like, well, investors are very impatient. So there hasn't been a big exit. So we're going to clamp down. We're not going to invest in digital health anymore. So you sort of have, so what do you do, right? So you have this like consumer appetite. So you have the people like us saying, we want to be sober curious, or, I want to do this in a different way. I don't want to go to my doctor's office and be called across the waiting room, wait there an hour across town. I'd rather be private. I would rather actually I'd rather do this in a private way that honors my right to privacy. And, but then you have this, largely those innovations come from the venture markets and they come from startups, and you have this clamp down. So we'll see how those two forces like kind of combine, like this like need for innovation and this like appetite plus this like reluctance to fund. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I think it's setting the stage for some great companies, but they're going to look significantly different than I think the noisy companies of the past, Workit included.
Sure. I mean, and that's so two things. I mean, I wanted to sort of, when we talk about the investor market and kind of that they're skittish around digital health. And then at the same time, I think there has been in the last at least 12 to 16 months, a certain exuberance around artificial intelligence and generative AI and what that's kind of pumping in and to healthcare and the capabilities. And one of the things that I think is interesting, and I think it has some relevance here, is, I've heard people talk about how what AI will do through assistive AI is to tackle some of the things that we couldn't afford to do before, right? Mm-hmm. So it's obviously not going to give the deep empathy that a practitioner can give, or expensive diagnostic tests at some very deep level, but that kind of regular check-in that a bot could do, or and also some measurements and tracking and identifying triggers. That those things it will be capable of, and maybe ultimately, as we were talking about, make the measurement of outcomes possible, right? Because we'll be capturing more data, and that ability to capture the data and not overwhelm the system, but be able to actually process it to then make decisions or get insights from it. So with that in mind, with that sort of exuberance around the technology that's possible and where it's coming, and then your experience and your knowledge of the current investor models, not models, but attitudes, behaviors, where do you think things are headed? And, where are you giving the advice to other female founders who might be out there just getting started, or to yourself as you, continue to grow the organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great question. I think AI is so promising and so fascinating. And I'm always an early adopter. Like, I'm the person that every time there's a new iPhone, I'm like, I'm going to get a new, I always love technology. And I think I like modern day wizardry. Like, I like the feeling of the magic that tech can create. And when you tear away all of like the bullshit around tech, sorry to say that, but so when I think about AI and how, so I have a mouth like a sailor. I curse all the time, and I'm really trying, because I have a little, my 4-year-old now is like smart enough to catch me, and she's like, Mom, she doesn't even allow me to say stupid. She's like, Mama, that is a bad word. That's a bad word. That's a problem. Like, she's our little ball buster, but Peach. And so, but anyway, about AI, I think that everybody, at least I know the people that are in the companies like Workit, or the companies that are in the kind of the 25 to 100 million range, like that kind of Series B plus company. Those companies have a hard road ahead integrating AI in a meaningful way into their stack, into their kind of work stack and their operative stack. And that's really coming off of what was a pretty, and still going, insane beatdown on digital health, whether merited or not, right? Like, whether necessary or not. In some ways, like, absolutely a reckoning was needed. In other ways, everyone is very, very scared. So I don't know if we're really all of the companies that made it through this winter and now are, in a post Series A, post Series B state. I don't know if we're going to see them be able to deploy AI in a really earth-shattering, like, groundbreaking way. Now, I think the companies that are being created right now, if they can get funded, those are the companies to watch. So I think AI is one of those things like the internet, like either you're digital or brick and mortar, and that DNA is set at the beginning. Not to say that a company can't evolve, but once your DNA is set, it's brick and mortar will always have an appendage of digital, and digital will always have an appendage of brick and mortar. And typically it doesn't go that way because it's cost prohibitive. AI, like, to be a truly generative chatbot, something like that, you need to build that from the start, because it's so regulated now and it's so touchy. Like, at Workit, we have so many strict measurement-based care protocols. Like, we're an actual company. So that's how I think about it. Like, I think we're going to see some effect of AI in those companies, but it's only going to be marginal. So I'm excited for this new kind of rash of startups. I'm excited to see what kind of emerges onto the scene. And I'm hoping that, from a female founder perspective, I think we commonly get either turnaround companies, or like, you get investors wanting to bet on you, but they want to bet on you not for your moonshot, but for your safe bet. So I'm hoping that we can kind of change that story as well. Those are the things I've been thinking about lately.
Thank you. Well, I love that. And I hope for that as well. In terms of, just where you see Workit sort of evolving and heading to, what is what is the future state? Are there things that you're super excited you're working on right now? What's to come? What should we be looking for?
I think Workit is so interesting in that I almost it's one of those organic things where you don't know why you still have patient as designers at the center of it, but it is. Like if you go into Workit culture, if you go into a Workit day, like we still have recovery meetings for the staff that I attend, right? Like it's such a rich culture. So I'm excited as Workit gets a lot larger and works with Medicaid and commercial plans across the country. I'm excited to keep that notion of nothing for us without us center stage. Like it's fun to see that kind of expand out. Our chief medical officer talks quite a bit from the role of being chief medical officer, but being inspired by the idea of patient as designers. And it's very cool. So I see Workit just continuing to serve as many people as humanly possible and to curry favor and build up trust with health plans to do so. I think it's important that clinical quality has always been our number one prerogative, despite everything, like all the ups and downs over the years. And I don't see that going away. But yeah, so I think that's in the future. And then, and what that looks like will be really interesting. We have a lot of really interesting things coming up. The DEA has to give us their final decision about in-person requirements for controlled substances. We have AI coming onto the scene. I think there's a lot of partnership opportunity there. You also have this bringing down, I mean, it's small and incremental, but it's meaningful. You have this like kind of dissipation of the stigma a little bit. And so you have primary care groups and hospital systems now going to Workit and saying, hey, can you augment my more general care practices with your specialty intervention? That's really exciting as well. So I think the future is bright, and I don't know. It's fun to be a real company now, 10 years later. We actually founded in 2015 too. So it's like, it feels like only yesterday, but it feels like a long time, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited to see what you'll bring to it as well. I'm sure it will be great, and the future is bright. Tell our audience how to get in touch with you and how to find more information about Workit Health. Sure. So you can just go to our website. It's www.workithealth.com. Workit it works if you work it. That's where it's from that AA adage. And yeah, so I'm on the Workit website. I write for our blog frequently, Robin at workithealth.com. And yeah, that's how to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robin. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and learn about both your experience and, all the great work you're doing at Workit Health. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Health Impact Live Digital Health Talks podcast. I hope you enjoyed Robin's insights and the work that she's doing, revolutionizing addiction treatment through telemedicine is truly inspiring. So join us next time as we continue exploring healthcare's digital frontier. I'm Megan Antonelli, signing off.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Health Impacts Digital Health Talk. Don't miss another podcast. Subscribe at digitalhealthtalks.com. And to join us at our next face-to-face event, visit healthimpactlive.com.